What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's do a little thing we like to call the mailbag at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those direct messages to get your questions answered here on the show. Sometimes, when it gets winter months, even though it's kind of sunny, it's kind of been dreary around here. You look in when you record your podcast, because we also do a video version, and I'm looking at myself. I'm like, I need to get some sun. I need to just go. I'm getting married in a couple weeks. I cannot be pasty and pale. I look terrible. I just need to get some. I need to get some rays. Tried to go on a walk yesterday with no hat and just get my head, but I got a long way to go. So we'll start with Dan. Given that Tee Higgins, excuse me, given that Tee Higgins is likely to be tagged by the Bengals, how would you attack the Patriots offseason? They have by far the most cap space in the league in a high draft position, but it seems like a weak draft and free agency class at wide receiver and O-line. What are your thoughts? I would be careful. I mean, maybe it turns out that way. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, he's been tagged. But let's just let everything play out. I think we'll have a lot of information over the next week when it comes to tags, when it comes maybe extensions, because you can extend your own player. I would just, I wouldn't have my hopes up and then have them shattered because I see a report. Not saying that he won't, but I think these things are very fluid. I just think you got to be very careful. And listen, this Vrabel and Elliott Wolf, who's a Packer guy, their history is not going crazy in free agency. I mean, think about Mike Vrabel's career. For some of you guys are a little young. Hell, I was probably a sophomore in high school when the Patriots signed him, but he got drafted in the mid to late 90s, and I don't think he ever was a full-time starter with the Steelers. And Belichick just loved his versatility. I don't think he cost very much money when they signed him in, was it 2000 or 2001? So I just think sometimes in free agency, everyone gets so excited about like Tee Higgins. Like the best free agent signings last year were like Zach Bond. It's not always some guy that costs a lot of money. And sometimes the sexiest guys, I remember in the Niners, they signed Javon Hargrave, 4 years, 80 million, 20 a year. It was a disaster. So I think you got to be very careful about the excitement level. Offensive linemen, like you can sign random guys that can be a good guard for you. I would just, this is not baseball where it's like, can we get Juan Soto? Can we get, I saw Vladimir Guerrero Jr. turn down whatever the Blue Jays were offering him. So like, you get guys like that. It's like, they're going to be sweet, plug and play. Like you get Kevin Durant in free agency in his prime or Shaq. That's not really football. It's very rare that like the best players don't hit free agency. Like Myles Garrett doesn't hit free agency. Trent Williams doesn't hit free agency. Those Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. So now doesn't mean you can't get a good player in free agency, but it's not fool's gold. But I think the hype behind it doesn't always equal the results. I got a buddy going to Scottsdale for spring break, and I was talking to him about your pod and stuff to do there. You brought up a restaurant one time that you said was kind of a hole in the wall, but it had this hangover sandwich or something along those lines. And it sounded awesome. Now he wants to try it. It was actually a hangover burrito, and it's called Tom's Thumb. It is a gas station that also doubles as a barbecue joint. And now the barbecue joint was on television for like Guy Fieri's Triple D. And it's a good barbecue joint, but the hangover burrito is just, if you're hungover, it'd be bomb. I wasn't even hungover and I ate the thing. Hey, John, thanks for answering the question. Speaking of mailbag question, what do you think teams have to do to compete for a championship? On paper, he's talking about Seattle. We have a talented roster, but it feels like we're stuck in quarterback purgatory and continue to be below average in the trenches. How does a front office try to solve problems when consistently drafting in the middle of the first round? You know what John Schneider has kind of turned in Seattle too, and this is a compliment in the Pittsburgh Steelers of like they're never going to suck. They just are not going to suck. It's not going to happen. But they're not close to competing for a Super Bowl. So it's like they're just drafting from 18 to 22 every year. Maybe as low as like 14, 15, 16, but never sniffing the top 10. And I mean, look at the last couple of years of Pete. They were winning 9 games. Look at this year. They went 10 and 7. What would happen if they rolled back the majority of their team? They'd win 9 to 10 games again. I don't know what the answer is. I think you with Schneider, he's selected so many high end players at different positions. He's gonna find talent. I do think at quarterback you're gonna have to get a little lucky. You got lucky with Russell Wilson, got him in the third round, and he was a star for you. Like, can you find your Jalen Hurts? Like to me, that's the question. Can you find your version of Purdy? Just a young player that you can pivot off Geno, and he can be a starter that you can build up the team with his cheap contract and win around. Like you're probably not going to draft a quarterback in the first round, but can you do that with someone a little later in the draft? I don't know the answer to that, honestly. Would you agree that the only reason Jalen Hurts speaking of Jalen, won the Super Bowl was because of a stacked team? Don't get me wrong, he's a great quarterback, but he has no Mahomes, Lamar, or Allen. Watching Jalen win the Super Bowl is like watching the Ravens win the 2012 Super Bowl. Joe Flacco is a great quarterback, but he was on a very stacked team. Am I crazy for thinking this? I think Jalen is much more impactful than Joe Flacco. Uh, we talked about it. Listen, if you're comparing Jalen to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, he's not as good as those players. No one would argue that, beside Jalen. But like Howie Roseman wouldn't argue that. Where Jalen is valuable is he's a dual threat quarterback. So yeah, he threw 18 touchdowns, but he also ran for 14. And his tush push play, like it's him. A lot of people try quarterback sneaks. They don't work. The tush push is because his power. How low we saw Josh Allen, who is bigger, stronger than Jalen, couldn't gain a yard against the Chiefs. So I pulled up Flacco. In 2012, Joe Flacco threw 22 touchdowns. And he ran for 3, which I imagine were all quarterback sneaks. So he had 25 total touchdowns. Jalen Hurts threw 18 this year, 14, I think had 34 touchdowns. So I had 9 more touchdowns that season. Now, where Flacco was pretty special is in their Super Bowl run, they played 4 games. Obviously, they went 4-0, they won the Super Bowl. He threw 11 touchdowns and no interceptions. So it was like, it's like a dude who had a random golf career, but like won a major. It's like, remember that time he got really hot at the U.S. Open? That was kind of Joe Flacco. I think Jalen's a better player than Joe Flacco. Right? If you could have 25-year-old Jalen Hurts or 25-year-old Joe Flacco, you would take Jalen Hurts. Part of Jalen Hurts is he's a dual threat player. Now, were there times this season when he was not playing well and they still won games because of the team? 100%. But Jalen played well in the Super Bowl. That's the other thing. Like, Jalen was not shitty in the Super Bowl. Here's my question. Now that the Super Bowl is over, I have been racking my brain on the top 5 quarterbacks. Top 3 are no-brainers. Brady, most rings, beat Mahomes, Montana 4-0 in the Super Bowl, and then Mahomes. I got a tie at 5 with Peyton and Elway. Both are elite, but both were not as successful as the top 3. Peyton kept getting beat by the Pats and Brady. When he finally got the Super Bowl, he faced a vastly inferior Bears team and won the game. Elway was getting routed in Super Bowls. It was only when he got a stacked team with Mike Shanahan as his coach. And I can't think of anyone else I would put it for. I got an open slot. Guys like Aikman, stacked team. Young, great player, stacked team. Only one Super Bowl. Marino, probably best pure passer, but only one appearance. Kelly is nice. Long question, so thanks for reading. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. I would mix Rodgers and Favre in there as well. Like I think the top 5, I think Brady is pretty entrenched at 1. I think Mahomes, Manning, Montana are kind of all in that group. I think once you get like 5 to 9, I think you can have a lot of arguments. Elway, Marino, Favre, Rogers, Steve Young. Uh, I think Steve Young's a better player than Troy Aikman. I wouldn't have. I don't think many people would have Troy Aikman as a top 10 quarterback, though he's obviously a really good player, Super Bowl champ several times over, stud. I mean, legend. But I think when you think top, when I say like Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, I don't think Troy Aikman. Hi John, love the pod. I never comment or write anything over the years, but I felt like this one was a disservice if I did not. For the love of God, do not fly to Dubai for your honeymoon. It was a joke, by the way. I was not one. It's not my call. Uh, Flying over the Mediterranean, all the options of the old romantic cities and cobblestone streets that live in women's minds to go to some fishing village in a desert converted to a city more or less the last century due to the oil boom in conservative Muslim country on a longer flight for not even half the vibe is not viable. Yeah, the Dubai trip will be John's. She she ain't going on honeymoon in Dubai. Question for the pod. I, like so many people, have been a Nick Sirianni hater, but winning the Super Bowl made me think of him completely different. To win like this, he has consistently for several years. He has consistently won for several years. Must be an elite leader of men because I don't know what else he does. But then I see a video on the Eagles YouTube channel of the offensive and defensive captains giving speeches the day before the game. Almost everyone, even the players like CJ Gardner Johnson, made me want to strap up and run through a fucking wall. Does it say more about Sirianni that he's a leader, or do the Eagles have a better core of leaders than all of the NFL? Follow up. Do you remember a locker room speech that stood out to you? Part of building a team, whether you're Bill Walsh, Andy Reid, Belichick, or you're Nick Sirianni, is the better players. If your best players are super high character, tough football guys, you're gonna have a much higher chance to win. So it's like when you see those speeches, and they were really good. I saw Lane Johnson's, I saw Jalen's, but I think most times when you get to the Super Bowl, like pretty high level dudes on these teams. Like this isn't a bunch of slappies. Those are on the teams drafted in the top 10. When you look at the Eagles, like they got, you watch Landon Dickerson and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and Zach Bond and Saquon and Jalen. Like these are high level cats. This is not jolly fuck around, strap it up, let's play a little ball. Like this is a serious way of life. And I mean, one that stood out to me is when the Patriots beat the Ravens in 2011, and Ray Lewis kind of gave this one of like, Joe Flacco, you do not get to hang your head after this loss because he was a pretty polarizing player at the time and he actually played well even in the loss. And it's like part of the reason the Ravens were good for so long is like, look who their best players were. It's like Haloti Nada, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. You know, the Eagles are full of like Brandon Graham. Look, same thing with the Chiefs. It's like this isn't. You got no chance to be good if you don't watch speeches from players in the playoffs and go, Jesus, this is pretty. I mean, I go back to when I was a kid. Like, think of the best players on the best teams. It's like Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Jerry Rice, Reggie White. It's like Brett Favre. You watch these guys, any NFL films clip, you like, I want to run through a wall for these guys. And I just think it's the best teams have the best players who are also the best guys. And when I say best guys, I mean like from a football character standpoint. All in on football means everything to them. This isn't like I love it when people say like this is my profession, not my life. Well, it kind of is. You work way more than you around your family and stuff. Obviously, your work doesn't define you as like a dad or like a family guy, but most people I know that are really successful, their work is a huge part of their life. And I don't want to say defines their life, but is a huge defining part of just the way they live their life. You spend a lot of time doing it. And it's always bothers me, and we're not that far away when most of the media, no one successful would sign up for their life. One, most don't make that much money. Two, most, if you follow them on Twitter over the years, can be a little miserable, and they can give, they can't take it. And when the draft comes around, they love doing this because players get asked like, how big of a priority is football to you? And teams get uncomfortable when you have like a balanced life. Well, yeah, if I'm going to pay a 23-year-old, I don't know, $20 million, I would like for football to be a pretty big priority for them. Like, sorry, call me crazy. I mean, sorry, I'm asking too much. This is not $100,000 a year job. Like, you don't just get to clock in and clock out. Like this, especially quarterbacks. And I would even say defensive and offensive linemen. Like, you better be all in because I'm going to need so much physical and mental toughness out of you to be a good player. If it's not a big part of your life, you just won't last. It's impossible. The game is just way too hard. And the media loves, like, oh, why is everyone so obsessed with their other interests? Because it's hard to have other interests during the football season. Not saying that you can't do other stuff, but football takes a large percentage of your time as a player during from August till ideally the NFL playoffs. Like Patrick Mahomes isn't dicking around that much for the last 6 months. Neither's Josh Allen. Maybe a round of golf here or there. Maybe, a date night once a week, but it's not, you're not watching Netflix 3 times, 4 times a week. It's just, he doesn't have time. He's exhausted. Takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of effort. And I just think that criticism always drives me fucking nuts. Like, yeah, sorry, I don't want the guy I'm investing in a shitload of money to uh have 17 other interests because it just diminishes and takes away your time. It just does. Let's face it. I would say people tend to be really good at things, pretty singular focused. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are. With the all new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From dunks to assists to rebounds, get behind your favorite player and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook and make your first pick. First time? Here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. As a baseball fan, I feel in recent years there has been a resurgence in viewership and attendance at baseball games. Even if stadium hot dogs and beers are overpriced, there's nothing better than taking the family out to a baseball game on a summer afternoon. NFL will always be king, but it feels like America's pastime is making a comeback. What say you? Well, I think the biggest brands in the sport are good, so that helps, right? The two biggest brands, the Yankees and the Dodgers, were just in the World Series, so it's like it's if you could pick an ideal matchup in baseball, you would go Yankees Dodgers every single year. Every single year. Like in basketball, what would the ideal matchup be? It would actually be the Warriors Lakers. That's what Adam Silver would choose to be his NBA Finals. Obviously, it's impossible, but that's what he would choose. Why? Because the two biggest brands are Curry and LeBron. So I think it has to be a. I just think that I, I I don't know. It's hard to tell. It's baseball is much more of a local sport than a national sport. Having moved from the Bay Area, where I mean the Giants have been so bad, but when they're just solid or just even good, they're a really big deal. Come to Arizona, like I like baseball and I like having it on in my background, but like I don't watch any Diamondbacks games. Where football, for example, like I'll watch Cardinal games. I'll watch whatever. I won't watch random teams play baseball. And that's I don't know if that's ever going to change, but I think the Dodgers story is a good one. It really is. People are like, it's bad for baseball. Well, what's good for baseball? Because what's been happening is not working. So you might as well have a team that's like couldn't be any more stacked and having teams try to beat them. Especially, the Mets, they have this really famous owner who's spending a shitload of money. The Yankees are good. The Phillies try. Yeah, I don't think it can be definitely not a bad thing. It seems like you're not a big baseball. We're getting a lot of baseball questions here. Not a big baseball guy, but that's my favorite sport. My question is, do you have any colleagues or guys you listen to in the baseball sphere that have a similar vibe to you? Do you think there's a lot of people putting out content like you do? LOL. Any insight? I don't know. I can't. I don't even know how to answer that question. I think. Let me try to say this in a nice way. I think it's hard to have a business built around baseball podcasts, right? The reason you see a lot more football podcasts or NBA podcasts or cultural podcasts or political podcasts, you can build businesses around those. Baseball, the listenership. I think I heard Portnoy talk about this like a couple years back about like when they were building their kind of their podcast, like the baseball podcast, no one listens. So I think it's more that it's hard for guys to make money on doing that to have an audience. But no, I don't. I don't listen to any baseball content in terms of podcasts or YouTube channels or anything. Uh, so I don't know if there's anyone with quote unquote my vibe out there. Hope there is. Hope he's killing it though. This is the last question. Cam Ward was recently quoted saying he'll remember all the teams that pass on him in the draft, and they'll pay the price for not drafting him. I'm a firm believer that humility is what wins in sports, but guys continue to puff their chests out all the time without achieving anything. Whenever I see athletes, especially quarterbacks, make comments like this, I immediately fade them as players who will be successful. I feel like I'm usually right. Josh Rosen saying he was going to win more Super Bowls than Brady. As a former scout and someone who's tied to the NFL, what are your thoughts on comments like this? Uh, it's weird. Like you do this long enough, I'm kind of numb to them. They don't mean anything to me. They don't like. Is it false bravado? Yeah, like bro, you're fucking just playing in the ACC. A couple years ago, you were at Incarnate Word. Like, let's not act like you're at Ohio State here kicking everyone's ass. Now you had a good season. I guess along. I don't really care. Like it doesn't bother me. But I think and I don't know really anything about the guy, but I think if you did a deep dive and people like, yeah, he kind of acts, maybe he's just a little insecure about it. To me, those comments, it's one of those, well, if he becomes a stud player, it looks really good, right? But I don't know what you have to gain from it. It's one of those, if it does not go well, everyone's ripping you for it. Not that he's thinking about it like that. I mean, let's face it, like when Brady went up to Robert Kraft like during rookie minicamp in the hallway and said, "This is the best decision you'll ever make." Well, once he becomes Tom Brady, it ages pretty well. I bet there have been comments like that from guys that get cut in training camp. You're like, no one ever talks about that. So anytime you do this, I mean, part of it is he's a big, big star. Honestly, every comment I've seen from Shador, just in regards to where he gets drafted, how he doesn't view it as a competition between him and Cam Ward, I actually think has been pretty high level. I haven't really seen anything from Cam Ward beside I'm gonna make them pay. It's like, bro, let's just fucking get drafted first. I'm with you. That's where I'm inclined to be, but ultimately it doesn't impact anything. Like, what's going to impact him? Is he good? Can he run an offense? How hard does he work? Does like because physically he's pretty gifted. I mean, there's like he's much more gifted than Shador. Like physically, he is a legit top 10 prospect, and just in terms of like physical qualities. Now, is he a good player? Um, I don't know. I probably have to watch a little more. I didn't watch that much Miami. Their games were just complete shootouts. I did watch a little of the Cal game when he came storming back. He makes some sweet plays. I mean, he's overall though. I think you got to be very careful about one thing I've learned when I worked in it and even doing this is making with talented players, like I'm out on this guy, right? Because like you can't pigeonhole yourself to a position that's like, well, like what if he matures? What if he gets better? If he just has an awful attitude and thinks he's way better than he is, like he's gonna have problems. But what if it's just a young guy? I mean, how old's Cam Ward? 22 years old. Some people say dumb stuff. He's 22 years old. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying like, yeah, I would recommend like, hey, just try to say the right stupid cliche bullshit before you're drafted, and then just you can say whatever you want. But I would just chill. But that's clearly not the tact he's taken. Um, Again, if he's good, it'll be a legendary comment. And whatever teams, if he ends up going like fifth or seventh or eighth, and a bunch of teams pass on him, we'll talk about it forever. If he sucks, we actually won't talk about it that much because we just won't talk about him that much. It just you just kind of be irrelevant.